David Cameron's announced £2 billion is to be spent over 5 years equipping special forces, such as the SAS, to deal with the terror threat. In a speech last night, the Prime Minister said 7 terrorist plots have been thwarted by British police and security services in the last 12 months. He also said Britain needed to show the same resolve in defeating terrorism that it displayed against Hitler during the Blitz.
We need to do more to ensure our agencies have the resources and the information they need to prevent and disrupt plots against this country at every stage. This will include over 1,900 additional security and intelligence staff and more money to increase our network of counter-terrorism experts in the Middle East, in North Africa, South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa.
Sajjad Karim is a Conservative MEP for the North West and joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, the funding for the security forces makes the front page of the Daily Mirror, and of course the story gets pages and pages of coverage. But the SAS to get £2 billion war chest to fight ISIS, there's a lot of pressure on the EU to have a unified response, isn't there?
There most certainly is, and I arrived back here at the European Parliament after the weekend yesterday, and it was absolutely clear as soon as I walked into the building and I started to meet colleagues that so far as any questions over resolve are concerned, if there ever was any, they certainly have disappeared following the Paris eventualities and the tragedy that has unfolded there. So I think there really is now a very clear direction in the mindset of most people who are involved in the processes here at an EU level to make sure that we do genuinely, at an individual country member state level, do what is necessary, and then also make sure that where we are able to pool our resources and our strengths in order to combat the types of threats that our citizens face, we will do so.
But cash for high-tech weapons, do you think that are all the member states going to start arming their security forces to the teeth, do you think, now?
No, I don't think that's the case at all, but it is absolutely right that each individual member state carries out an assessment of what the risk is to them. There are different levels of risk to different member states, and there are different sorts of risk to different member states, and individual member states have to carry out an assessment to what is required by them in order to be able to best face the risks. And in our case, the Prime Minister set out our strategy yesterday in as much detail as he possibly could, I thought.
Yeah, well, Francois Hollande yesterday, he vowed to build a union to combat terror. With this now very much at the forefront, how will the EU cope, given that there's a feeling that it is swamped in the refugee crisis? Already struggling, isn't it?
Well, that's not the sort of words I would ever use when speaking about refugees, but quite clearly...
I'm talking about being swamped in the crisis rather than the individual refugees, Mr. Karim.
There are very real challenges that we are facing today, because we do have a huge influx of people coming into the European Union. There still remains a question mark over the security issues that apply to when we have movements of those sorts of numbers coming through. Borders are being replaced at various points, and really this is, in many ways, a challenge for the existence of the free movement of people across the European Union in itself as well.
And just an added struggle for Europe. I mean, it's been well documented, you know, the arguments between the member states about how to deal with the refugee crisis. But given that, I mean, it's a massive, massive focal point. And with this on top, how does the EU begin to cope?
Well, this is it. I mean, this really is today a test for the European Union. Either the European Union faces this and delivers for our citizens what they expect from the European Union, or we fail. And if we fail, then I'm afraid we really are working towards the very slow dismantling of parts of what we were trying to construct so far as the European Union was concerned. And one of the fundamentals is the right of people to be able to move freely.
Do you think it is a turning point then?
Union. It most certainly is, and that's one of the things that comes out very, very clearly when you speak to members of the European Parliament from a variety of member states.
And do you think as we head towards a referendum, much will be made of this? Because there are people, yesterday were very quick to say, draw up the drawbridges, and close the borders. Do you think that will add to the campaign that says we should pull out of the EU?
Well, I think knee-jerk reactions are never the best way to put in place policy. And we still do not know exactly what has happened here. What we do know is that there is a number of French citizens, French-born and people living within Europe that were involved in this. Whether there was actually any external input into this, there was certainly external planning, but what sort of external input there was in terms of physical presence here is a questionable issue at this moment in time. We need to establish the facts, as Theresa May said yesterday. That's the first thing we need to do. And secondly, we also need to assess whether the means by which people can come in, i.e. ISIS operatives, could possibly come in. What other avenues are available to them? This is not the only route people have to come into the European Union, but to say that we should turn our backs on genuine refugees in order to try and come up with a policy that possibly deals with a situation that may or may not have happened, I'm afraid is just a knee-jerk reaction. It's a very populist reaction, and it's not the sort of reaction that I would ever sign up to.
How do you cope with a homegrown terrorism threat? And just if you can put it in a personal perspective as well, given that 7 years ago, you were at the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel in Mumbai, weren't you, when terrorists attacked there, and you said then you hoped it would never happen again. To see this, what's happening now, on a personal sense, must have more than shocked you.
Well, yes. Friday, when things were unfolding, Friday night, it was actually a very, very difficult time for me on a personal level. And one of the things that was really most shocking about this entire episode, that it was an entire copycat of exactly what had happened in Mumbai. But here we were actually dealing with people who were homegrown terrorists, based here, born here, brought up here, and I'm actually speaking to you now from Brussels. And there are huge police operations still underway in the immediate vicinity where I am, and much further afield as well. The threat is real. The threat is here. It needs to be rooted out. It needs to be faced. Our governments need to equip our security services to deal with these homegrown terrorists, and we've just got to make sure that we don't in any way become complacent about the extent of the challenge that lies ahead for us.
All right, thanks for coming on to speak to us this morning. Join us from Brussels, Sajjad Karim there, Conservative MP for the North West, brings the time to